The Galactic Union Grand Archive floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a dying star. It was a place of knowledge where billions of records from different civilizations were kept. Few ever came here, and even fewer dared to explore the restricted zone, where the oldest and most dangerous information was stored. Tonight, the archive's caretaker, an AI called Syra, detected something unusual. A distress signal, one that had been buried for thousands of years, had suddenly activated. The message came from an ancient, forgotten world. It came from Earth. Syra hesitated. The Union had long classified Earth as a dead planet, abandoned and off-limits. No one was allowed to go there, but this message was different. It was a warning. Earth must remain untouched. Never wake them. The AI processed the message, searching for its meaning. Who sent it? Who were they? And why was the signal suddenly active after so many years? Curiosity drove Syra to send the data to a group of explorers, outsiders who wouldn't ask too many questions. The crew of the starship Dawnbringer. Captain Doran Voss sat in his dimly lit command chair, staring at the transmission on his screen. He was a former military officer turned independent explorer, known for taking dangerous missions. Across from him, Dr. Lila Veron, a human historian, adjusted her glasses, her eyes filled with excitement. "Earth," she whispered. "No one has been there in thousands of years. It's a lost world." Beside her, Varkesh, a reptilian scientist with emerald green scales, tapped his claws on the table. "And yet, someone is calling to us from there." Doran leaned forward. "Not calling," he corrected. "Warning." Silence filled the ship. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Earth had always been a mystery. Some believed it was destroyed. Others said it was abandoned for reasons unknown. But this was the first time they had real evidence. A message from the past. "Whatever happened to Earth?" Doran said, standing up. "It's time we found out." The decision was made. They set course for the forgotten home of humanity. Arrival at Earth. As the Dawnbringer approached Earth's orbit, the crew fell silent. The planet was still there, floating like a ghost in the void. Its surface was covered in thick clouds, swirling with strange golden mist. No lights, no cities, no signs of life. But the signal was still broadcasting from below. "This is unsettling," Varkesh muttered, his tail flicking nervously. "It looks untouched, yet wrong." Dr. Veron analyzed the data on her console. "The atmosphere is breathable, but there's some kind of energy field interfering with our senses." Doran exhaled. "We go in slow. No mistakes." As they descended, the ship's systems flickered. The lights dimmed, and a static hiss came through their radios. Then, for a brief second, a voice whispered through the speakers. "You should not have come." The crew froze. "Did you hear that?" one of the pilots asked, his voice shaking. Doran's grip tightened on his armrest. "Ignore it. Proceed with landing." The first steps. The ship landed in the ruins of what once was a great city. The skyline had crumbled, overtaken by nature. Skyscrapers stood like skeletons, covered in vines. The roads were cracked, disappearing beneath thick fog. Dr. Veron knelt beside a broken wall, running her fingers over strange symbols carved into the stone. They weren't just human. Some were written in alien languages, once spoken by civilizations that had never even met humans. Varkesh examined the markings. "This isn't a warning from just one species. Many left these messages." Dr. Veron's voice was barely above a whisper. "They all say the same thing." Doran turned to her. "What do they say?" She swallowed hard. "Do not wake them." A gust of wind howled through the ruins. Something moved in the fog. Doran raised his weapon, scanning the shadows. "We're not alone." Then, from deep within the city, a sound echoed, a distant, rhythmic pounding like a giant heartbeat beneath the ground. Thump, thump, thump. The crew exchanged glances, unease settling over them. "Captain," Dr. Veron whispered, "I think we just stepped into something we don't understand." Doran exhaled, gripping his weapon. "Then we better start understanding fast." Beneath them, the heartbeat continued. The thick mist swirled around the ruins like a living thing, curling between shattered skyscrapers and abandoned streets. Captain Doran Voss led the team cautiously through the remains of the ancient city, his rifle gripped tightly. The steady thumping beneath their feet hadn't stopped. Dr. Lila Veron scanned the symbols on walls again, her fingers tracing the strange markings. These warnings, they weren't written at the same time. Some are thousands of years apart. Others, much, much older. Older than human civilization. asked Vakesh, the reptilian scientist. She nodded. Some of these are from species that shouldn't even know what Earth is, and yet they all say the same thing: do not wake them. Doran glanced around the desolate streets. The silence of the city was unsettling, too silent, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. We need to find the source of that signal. If someone left a warning, maybe they left answers too. They pushed forward, deeper into the ruins. Something watched them from the mist. Shadows in the fog. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. Every now and then, one of them would swear they saw a figure moving just at the edge of their vision. But whenever they turned, nothing was there. Vakesh flicked his tongue in the air, tasting it. Something isn't right. The air is filled with something unnatural. Then a whisper drifted through the fog. Not the wind, not the static from their radios. A voice. Turn back. Dr. Doran spun around. Who said that? Nobody answered. Doran clenched his jaw. Let's keep moving. Then came the footsteps, soft, shuffling movements echoing through the ruins. The team stopped, gripping their weapons. Scanners showed nothing. Vakesh said, his frills rising in alarm. Doran's instincts screamed at him. They were not alone. And then a shadow moved. The vault beneath the city. They followed the signal to a massive underground entrance, sealed with enormous metal doors. The symbols covering them were fresh, not ancient. Someone or something had reinforced this place recently. This must be it, Dr. Doran said. The source of the distress signal. Doran motioned to his crew. Vakesh, can you open it? The reptilian examined the controls, his clawed fingers moving swiftly. It's locked with an old human encryption, but I can bypass it. As he worked, the whispers grew louder. Leave this place. You should not have come. They are not dead. Dr. Doran shivered. This isn't an echo. Something is speaking to us. The locks clicked open. The massive doors creaked, sliding apart to reveal a dark chamber below. A single light flickered in the depths, illuminating rows of metal pods, thousands of them. Inside each pod lay a human, their faces peaceful, but their eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids as if trapped in an endless dream. Vakesh's eyes widened. They're alive. And then, one of the pods activated. With a hiss, the glass lifted, and the man inside opened his eyes. He gasped for air, his pupils dilated with terror. His first words made the blood in their veins run cold. You fools, you've doomed us all. Beneath their feet, the thumping grew louder. Something was waking up. The underground chamber was silent, except for the slow mechanical hiss of the opening pod. A thin mist of freezing vapor spilled out, curling around the floor. Captain Doran Voss tightened his grip on his rifle as the man inside the pod sat up, gasping for air. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, but his eyes burned with terror. Dr. Doran stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? The man's breathing was ragged. He stared at them, disbelief and dread flashing across his face. You, he whispered, you shouldn't be here. Doran stepped closer. We received a distress signal. It led us to this vault. He gestured to the rows of cryopods behind him. Who are these people? What happened to Earth? The man exhaled sharply, running a trembling hand through his short, dark hair. My name is Commander Elias Kane, and if you open this place, it means we're too late. The ground rumbled. The truth above Earth. Dr. Doran rushed to the pod's control panel, checking Kane's vitals. These readings. He's been in cryosleep for over 5,000 years. Vakesh flicked his tongue, his frills raised in alarm. That should not be possible. No known species can survive in stasis for that long. Kane slowly pulled himself out of the pod, his movements weak but urgent. He ignored them, his eyes darting toward the chamber doors. Did you hear it? Doran narrowed his eyes. Hear what? Kane turned to him, his expression grim. The heartbeat. The chamber fell into a dead silence. Then, as if in response, the thumping returned. A slow, deep pulse from beneath the earth. Thump, thump, thump. Dr. Doran's voice was barely a whisper. What is it? Kane swallowed hard. Not what, but who. Doran clenched his jaw. Explain. Kane hesitated, his gaze dark. Then, finally, he spoke. 5,000 years ago, Earth was under attack. Not by an enemy we could fight, not by ships or armies. His hands curled into fists. It was something ancient, something we couldn't kill. Vakesh's tail flicked. At life form. Kane shook his head. Not life, not death, something in between. Doran frowned. Then how did humanity survive? Kane exhaled. We didn't. Silence. He pointed at the cryopods surrounding them. This was our last resort. We put ourselves to sleep, sealed this vault, and sent out the warning. The plan was simple. If no one ever woke us up, they would never wake up either. The thumping grew louder. Varkesh's frills flattened against his head. You mean, they're still here? Kane's voice was cold. They never left. The nightmare awakens. The rumbling beneath them turned violent. Dust rained from the ceiling. Warning lights flashed red. The computers in the chamber flickered, showing strange, unreadable symbols, something rewriting the system. Then the whispers returned. This time, they weren't soft. You woke them. Dr. Doran grabbed Doran's arm. Captain, we need to leave. Now. But the chamber doors slammed shut, and from the deepest part of the vault, something began to rise. The chamber shook violently as the deep, rhythmic thumping turned into a steady roar. Metal groaned. Lights flickered. The computers sparked, filling the room with the acrid smell of burning circuits. Captain Doran Voss raised his rifle, his eyes scanning the chamber doors. Varkesh, get those doors open. The reptilian scientist's claws flew across the control panel, but the system was unresponsive. Something has locked us in. Commander Elias Kane gritted his teeth. Of course it did. Dr. Lila Veron turned to him, panic creeping into her voice. What's waking up? What exactly did humanity put to sleep? Kane glared at her. Something we couldn't kill. The ground beneath them cracked. Then the screams began. The war that never ended. Kane took a deep breath. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. 5,000 years ago, we fought a war. Not against an empire, not against an invasion. Against something that was already here. Doran frowned. What do you mean? Kane's face darkened. They weren't aliens. They weren't machines. We don't know what they were. He pointed at the cracked floor. They lived beneath us, hiding in the deep places of the world. We called them the sleepers. Dr. Varan felt ice run through her veins. And we woke them up. Kane's fists clenched. No, you woke me up, and that's all they needed. A sudden howl echoed through the vault. The noise wasn't human. It wasn't anything human. The first attack. Doran spun around as a shape moved in the darkness. At first, it was just a shadow, too long, too thin. But then it crawled into the flickering light. Dr. Varan gasped. It looked human, but wrong. Its arms were too long, its eyes too deep, its skin stretched too tight over its bones. Its jaw unhinged, revealing rows of jagged teeth. And then it charged. Doran fired. The energy blast hit the creature in the chest, but instead of falling, it twisted, its body bending in unnatural ways as it kept moving. It lunged at Varkesh. The reptilian barely dodged as the creature's claws sliced the air where his head had been. He hissed, leaping back. It's fast. Kane grabbed a weapon from the supply rack and aimed. You can't kill it like that. Doran shot again, this time straight through its skull. The creature stopped. Then, to their horror, the wound closed itself. Oh, hell, Doran muttered. No way out. The vault doors shook. More shadows shifted beyond the entrance. Kane grabbed Dr. Veron's wrist, his voice urgent. Listen to me. These things, they are not alive the way we understand. You can't kill them. You can only put them back to sleep. Dr. Veron's mind raced. How? The room rumbled as more cracks formed in the floor. More coming. Kane locked eyes with her. We need to get to the control room. If we can activate the stasis fields again, we might have a chance. Varkesh hissed as the creature lunged again. If we live that long. Doran reloaded his rifle, his face grim. Then let's move. Now. The creatures screamed, the sound shaking the air as the teen ran for their lives. The vault shook violently, dust falling from the ceiling as the monstrous sleepers clawed their way out of the darkness. Their elongated limbs twisted unnaturally, their empty eyes locked onto the fleeing crew. Captain Doran Voss led the charge, his boots pounding against the metal floor as he fired over his shoulder. Kane, where's the damn control room? Commander Elias Kane was already sprinting beside him, his face pale but determined. Deeper inside the vault. But if they've woken up, they won't let us reach it easily. A blood-curdling shriek erupted behind them. Varkesh spun around just in time to see one of the sleepers drop from the ceiling, landing directly behind Dr. Veron. Look out! Dr. Lila Veron barely had time to scream before clawed hands lashed out, grabbing for her throat. Belam. A single gunshot echoed through the chamber as Kane fired. The creature's head snapped back, But just like before, the wounds sealed itself instantly. Doran grabbed Veron's arm and yanked her away before the thing could recover. "Move! We don't have time for this." More shadows shifted in the distance. The vault was full of them, and they were all waking up. The forbidden depths. The team sprinted down a decaying corridor, metal walls flickering with failing lights. The deep thumping hadn't stopped. It was getting faster. Dr. Veron gasped for breath. "What is that sound?" Kane's face was grim. "It's not a sound. It's a heartbeat." Doran's blood ran cold. Of what? Kane didn't answer. Ahead, a massive blast door loomed before them. The words "Control CHMBR, Authorized personnel only" were barely visible beneath layers of dust and corrosion. Kane skidded to a halt, his fingers flying over the access panel. "I can override this, but I need time." Varkesh turned, his frills flaring. "You have 30 seconds. Maybe less." The sleepers were coming. Their movements were inhuman, their bodies bending in ways that defied physics. Some of them crawled along the walls, others slithered on all fours. Their hollow eyes gleamed in the dim light. Then they screamed, a sound so wrong, so unnatural, that it felt like knives scraping across the brain. Doran gritted his teeth. "Hold the line." He opened fire, plasma rounds tearing through the first wave of creatures. But just like before, the wounds sealed instantly. Dr. Veron backed against the control door, her hands shaking. "They don't die. How do we stop them?" Kane snarled, slamming his fist into the access panel. "You don't stop them. You just hope you can lock them away before they consume everything." The door slid open. Inside, now, buried secrets. The team rushed inside, Kane slamming his fist onto the emergency panel. The doors slammed shut just as the creatures lunged, one of them barely missing Doran's arm as it clawed for him. Boom! The vault door shuddered as the sleepers pounded against it, their screams vibrating through the walls. Doran exhaled sharply, turning to Kane. "We're in. Now what?" The control room was massive, lined with flickering monitors and ancient machinery. In the center of the room stood a massive containment console, its screens showing biometric readings, hundreds of them. Kane ran to the controls, his fingers flying over the keys. "If I can reactivate the stasis field, we can put them back to sleep." Dr. Veron scanned the data. "Wait, these readings, there's something beneath us." Kane's face darkened. "Yeah, the sleepers. They were just the first layer." Doran's jaw tightened. "There's something worse." Kane's voice was cold. "They were only the guards." The thumping beneath their feet grew louder. Something far bigger was waking up. The thumping turned into a roar, shaking the entire chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. The monitors flickered, screens displaying strange symbols, ancient warnings in a language long forgotten. Captain Doran Voss braced himself against a console. "Kane, tell me we still have a way to stop this." Commander Elias Kane barely looked up. His fingers flew over the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm trying to reactivate the stasis field, but something, or someone, is overriding the system." Dr. Lila Veron stared at the readings, her face pale. "The power core is failing. If we can't stabilize it, the field won't hold." Varkesh hissed. "And if the field collapses?" Kane's voice was grim. "Then the thing under us wakes up. And trust me, you don't want that." The thumping grew faster, the sound almost like a heartbeat accelerating. And then, the door behind them buckled. A clawed hand punched through the metal, the jagged edges curling like paper. The sleepers had found them. The Guardian's warning. Dr. Veron's fingers flew across the interface. "We don't have enough power to reinitiate full containment. We need an alternative." Kane gritted his teeth. "There's one way, but you're not gonna like it." Doran fired another shot at the door as more claws punched through the metal. "Try me." Kane pointed at the deepest part of the vault. "There's a secondary control system below us. It was built as a failsafe in case the main stasis field was breached." Varkesh's tail flicked. "And let me guess, it requires manual activation." Kane nodded. "Someone has to go down there and override the emergency lockout." Doran reloaded his weapon. "Then let's move." But Kane didn't move. His eyes were locked on the screens, his expression darkening. Dr. Veron followed his gaze. "What is it?" Kane exhaled. "The secondary system isn't just a failsafe. It's a prison lock." Varkesh's frills twitched. "A prison for what?" Kane's voice was almost a whisper. "The first sleeper." The chamber went silent. Then the floor cracked open beneath them. The first sleeper awakens. The team stumbled back as the ground split, revealing a deep, black void beneath the facility. A presence shifted in the darkness. Something vast, something wrong. A voice echoed through the vault. "You should have let me sleep." The sleepers outside the room stopped their assault. They froze as if listening. Then, in eerie unison, they knelt, pressing their foreheads to the ground. Doran's grip tightened on his rifle. "That's not good." A shake began to rise from the depths. It was nothing like the others. This was bigger, older, and infinitely worse. It was not just a sleeper. It was the one they all served. Kane's voice was barely audible. "God help us." The final choice. The monitors overloaded, data streams flooding the screens with incomprehensible symbols. The vault shook violently, alarms screaming. Dr. Doran turned to Kane. "Tell me we still have an option." Kane clenched his jaw. "We do, but it's a one-way trip." Doran narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Kane's hands hovered over the controls. "The failsafe system isn't meant to contain it. It's meant to bury it. If we trigger it, the vault, this entire facility, will collapse, sealing everything inside. Forever." Varkesh exhaled sharply. "Including us." A deep rumble came from below. The first sleeper was rising. Doran took a breath, his mind racing. There was no time left. They had one choice to make. Seal the vault, or let the nightmare escape. The first sleeper continued to rise. Shadows twisted unnaturally around its shifting form, a mass of darkness that defied logic. Its hollow eyes, if they could even be called that, seemed to pierce through time itself. The vault trembled. The sleepers outside remained kneeling, their heads bowed in silent worship. Captain Doran Voss gritted his teeth, sweat running down his face. Kane hit the failsafe. "Now." Commander Elias Kane hesitated, his hands hovering over the controls. "If I do this, there's no way out." Dr. Liliveran swallowed hard. "There's no way out anyway." A deep voice rumbled through the chamber, vibrating in their bones. "You cannot stop what was before you. What sleeps must one day wake." The lights exploded, plunging the room into flickering red emergency strobes. The first sleeper moved. The sacrifice. Doran opened fire, but the plasma rounds vanished before they could hit their target, consumed by the entity's presence. Varkesh hissed, "Weapons are useless." Kane's fingers slammed the emergency override. "Then let's pray the ancients built something that isn't." The facility's core screamed to life. Warning sirens blared. "Faci ISMAK lock in SEATE. Total facility lico LAPSA and 90 SECONDS." The vault shook violently as massive containment pillars rose from the floor, glowing with ancient energy. The first sleeper turned its head, its form twisting in unnatural ways. "This prison cannot hold me." Doran's pulse pounded. "It doesn't have to. It just has to bury you." The ceiling began to collapse. "The escape," Kane cursed. "We're still in here. The escape tunnels collapsed centuries ago." Dr. Doran pointed to a flickering monitor. "Not all of them. Look. There's an old maintenance shaft leading to the surface." Doran grabbed Kane's arm. "Where?" Varkesh pulled up the coordinates. "It's on the other side of the chamber, past the sleepers." The creatures were still kneeling. "For now." Doran exhaled. "Then we move. Fast." They ran. As they passed, the sleepers lifted their heads, their empty eyes watching. Then, as one, they screamed. Buried forever. They reached the shaft just as the vault began to cave in. Dr. Doran climbed first, followed by Varkesh. Kane hesitated, staring at the control panel. Doran turned. "Kane, move." Kane's expression hardened. "Someone has to make sure it locks from the inside." Doran's eyes widened. "Don't be an idiot." Kane shoved him toward the ladder. "Go." Before Doran could stop him, Kane slammed the final command. The door sealed shut, trapping him inside. The last thing Doran saw was Kane smiling grimly before the rock walls collapsed in on him. The first sleeper screamed in rage, and then everything went silent. Aftermath. Doran, Dr. Doran, and Varkesh emerged onto the barren surface just as the entire vault caved in behind them. The ground rumbled, and then stopped. Dr. Doran collapsed to her knees. "Is it over?" Doran stared at the ruined landscape. "For now." Varkesh's frills twitched, but it is not dead. Only sealed again. Doran clenched his fists. "Then we make sure no one ever finds this place again." Above them, the stars shone cold and distant. Deep beneath the earth, something still whispered in the dark, waiting to wake once more.